Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Time to Come Alive. As usual, we have this wonderful opportunity every week to have some fantastic, engaging conversations with wonderful people. And today is no different. And I will introduce my special guest in just a moment. And if you're on live on Facebook Live, feel free to share this on your timeline so other people can join in. And that way you have something to talk about today or the rest of the week, something that you saw. Those of you who are live with us on Zoom, thank you so much for being here. Please feel free to also share that you're listening to Time to Come Alive. That way you can engage some of your friends and people in your circle to have these conversations with you. In the meantime, I want to take a moment to just get mindful of what we're about to experience, of the conversation that we're going to be having before I introduce my special guest. Our topic today is about control. And so I think this is probably something that many of us deal with. And the meditation that we have, or the mindful moment that we have today, is actually inspired by the Chopra Center and their website. So I want to just have you all start off by getting comfortable if you're sitting or if you're standing. And it might be helpful for you to close your eyes if you choose to. For some, it might be helpful to just unfocus your gaze, soften your gaze a bit. And with that, just take a couple of deep cleansing breaths as you allow your mind to settle, get grounded. I have a few phrases as we start that I'd like for you to repeat to yourself. Taking a breath, repeat to yourself. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. You might say that one more time. May I be happy. May I be peaceful. May I be free from suffering. As you say those phrases to yourself, just think of them washing over you like a warm bath. And this is the compassion that we have towards ourselves. We don't always have the ability to mindfully manage when that control issue comes flaring up. But you can be compassionate to yourself by saying those phrases. And now, for those that have a brand of control towards other people, I'd like you to think of a person or a group of people in your life with whom you'd also like to express some compassion. And we're going to use the same phrases, but this time, these are the phrases I'd like for you to repeat to yourself. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering. I'll say those again. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering. And finally, I want you to think of an organization or perhaps a community of people for whom you would like to express some compassion. Hold that in your mind, and we'll say those phrases again. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering. One more time. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering. Okay, you want to take a breath in. Exhale. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes or refocus your gaze. All right, welcome back. So I know today's topic really we have to be very compassionate with each other and ourselves because it can be quite a touchy subject when we talk about control and control issues. And the person that I thought would be perfect to bring on for this conversation is one that I had the fortune of maybe getting to know really well, I should say. I met many years ago, but really really getting to know her about 3 or 4 years ago when I was wanting to celebrate my birthday. But I wanted to celebrate my birthday in a unique and fun way. I just discovered that the expression of love in my life had only been limited, excuse me, to certain relationships, those relationships that I could control, those relationships that I felt qualified. And I wanted to unleash love upon my life in different ways. And so I actually enrolled the support of Grace Vyvyan, Reverend Grace. And we had the opportunity to walk through a way in which I could do that with integrity, a way in which I could do that and have fun with it. And we created together hashtag 16 Days of Love with Hope. And Grace, I don't know if you remember that or not.
Oh, yeah.
But we spent hours. I called her my love mentor for many years, or for many months after that, because so much of the process for me was really just being able to be compassionate with myself when some kind of judgment came up about doing it a certain way, or certain people were going to participate and how it's going to look. And one of the things I appreciate so much about you, Grace, and want to share with other people, is that you remind me of who I am when I forget. You know, and that happens a lot, especially when, in my case, I wanted a certain outcome, and I wanted it a certain way and a certain time. And you would remind me of who I am and what I'm here to do. And you still do that to this day. And we've taken on over the last year and a half or so, meeting on a regular basis. And we have these really profound conversations for hours. And I just admire you so much and appreciate so much of what you bring to my life. So glad that you could join us this morning and for this program. Welcome.
We have a mutual admiration society. I never leave you without being uplifted. You're just a person in my life.
Thank you. Same here. Same here. Now I'm curious, and I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, but I'm curious if you could tell everyone why you said yes to coming on this program. It's not one that you participate in on a regular basis, but I know you're super supportive of everything I do. But I'm curious about why you said yes and what you would like to get out of this experience for yourself.
I said yes because you're so persuasive. I mean, it was presented to me in such a way that I thought, oh, well, I guess I could do that, couldn't I? I would never have volunteered. I would never have thought of doing it. But you just have that you said that I supported you. You just, you have a way of supporting somebody, to encouraging them. I felt like, oh, well, maybe I do have something to offer that somebody else might be willing to listen to. So I said yes. It was only later that my control issues kicked in and it scared me spitless.
So I'm going to ask about that in just a second. So knowing that you said yes and control issues came up, what would you like to get out of this experience today?
I want to speak in such a way that Spirit just allows me to flow. I want my control issues to erase themselves so that I really can speak in such a way that I say something that Spirit is meant for me to say that will be valuable to somebody out there listening. And it's been a real challenge. My control issues are not gone. I have this recurring dream sometimes. I haven't had it in I don't know, months, but I have this recurring dream where I'm an actress and I'm about to go on. The play is about to start and I can't remember one single line. Or I'm about to deliver a speech. I've lost all my notes. Knowing that this was not going to be a scripted talk, but it was just going to be a conversation, and I didn't know what the questions were going to be. This is my worst nightmare. So I'm going to be able to get through this well. I've still got a lot to work on.
Well, you're doing well so far, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of your worst nightmare.
Oh, my pleasure.
So now I obviously you described that not having something scripted and not really being prepared, and then those recurring dreams, this need to prepare in advance, right? This need to plan is so important to you. Talk to us about where that comes from.
Well, there's the nature and the nurture. There's nature and nurture, and it's both, absolutely both. I am born on the 22nd of August on the cusp. My sun sign is Leo. So I have these grand and wonderful visions, and I have such a personality that everybody wants to do it with me. I can't understand why anybody wouldn't want to do it with me. You understand? I'm this big leader in that way. And then the other sign, and there are 12 zodiac signs. 75% of my zodiac signs are in Virgo. 9 of my signs, you have 12, and those 9 of them are in Virgo. And the goal of a Virgo is to be perfect in everything that you do.
And Grace, I only do this with love because you and I know each other. But are you looking at your notes from yesterday?
What? Me? I have a few little phrases that, they didn't stick in my head, so I wanted to make sure that I could remember them. I'm still working on the control, okay? Virgo not only wants to be perfect, but a Virgo is very picky. A Virgo is orderly and, knows all of it and wants to follow instructions and be the perfect person. So there's the Virgo Leo side of my control. And then this may get a little personal, but the nurture side, well, in the first place, I was the middle child of 5 children, but I had 2 brothers older than me and 2 brothers younger than me. So I felt like, I was the special child. It wasn't like I was the middle child. I was a special child because I was the girl. And I've always told myself I wasn't spoiled. Even though I was the only girl, I wasn't spoiled. And how can you be spoiled in a family of 5? 5 kids. But I've realized that I did hold a special place. I felt myself to be special. I kind of, I had some, what do they call that, privilege. I felt that I had some privilege in the household. And I didn't realize that until just recently. But it's kind of carried through, that I've always felt like what I wanted is probably what I should have. And the way I wanted to do it is the way it should be done. I think that was part of the nurture. And a real important part of the nurture was when I was 4 years old, I had a sexual experience playful experience with a little girl down the street. But in order for this to do it, she was a little older than I was, and she told me to go under the house so we could do this. And my mother called and called and called, didn't know where it was. She freaked out totally. Now, I have to tell you, my mother grew up in a household where when she was 14, she went to her mama and said, "Mama, Della," her sister, "tells me that babies come from your navel. Is that true?" Her mother, my grandmother, backhanded her and said, "Don't you come around talking to me about filthy things like that ever again." My mother had no chance to have a healthy idea about what her libido was or sexuality was or so forth. So when she found her 4-year-old experimenting sexually, oh my God, it freaked her out. She needed to stop this immediately. And the way she did it was to stand me in front of my father when he got home. And I had to admit to him what I did. And it just seared my soul. And I realized in that moment, I think the decision that I made in my life right then was, I got to do stuff right. I absolutely have to do stuff right, or I'm not going to be loved. Oh my God, I got to do right. So then when I was 6 years old, I was involved in the mildest form of incest. Male in my household we began playing, began with touching and stroking and proceeded to fellatio and cunnilingus. And I knew this wasn't right, but it was that same push me, pull you with, "Ooh, this feels good, but why am I here doing this? Oh, but it really feels good. Why am I doing this?" It was very much of a push me, pull you. And I decided that after a while, I decided that I was not going to participate in that the guilt and the darkness of it outweighed any kind of pleasure that I got from the attention from him from the pleasure that I got. And so I told him, okay, we're not going to do that again. And so, of course, he said, oh, yes, we are. And I said, oh, no, we're not. You know, he kept coming back to me. I remember one time, walked in while I was sitting on the toilet in the bathroom. And that was it. I told him, no, I'm not doing this anymore. I shouted at him, go away. I'm not doing this. I think I learned in that instance that in order to be right, again, to do the right thing, I had to take control of my life, and it was up to me to do it. In order to be safe, in order to do the right thing in life, I had to be forceful and directed. So, and by the way, anybody who has experienced incest, they say that it takes you about 30 years or so before you kind of begin to come to terms with it. And I can remember driving down Central Expressway in Dallas one day thinking, feeling guilty about that 6-year-old experience and thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I letting this experience dog me like this with guilt? I mean, after all, I'm not even that person anymore. So I decided, it was a decision, I'm not going to feel guilty about that anymore. But what I actually did was to compartmentalize it. And it wasn't until about 15 years ago that events happened in my life and I focused, and that shame exhibited itself as sciatica. And I was flat on my back with sciatica for 6 weeks and began to think about it all. And I realized during that period of time, I'd always thought that I had this push me, pull you attitude towards sex. And I realized I don't have an issue with sex. I have an issue with shame. And I was able, 15 years ago, I guess it was, I was able to realize that it was the shame in my life that had dogged me all this time. And I processed it. I don't remember exactly what my process was, but I know that I came to a realization that there's no shame to be held about my libido. Absolutely none. No shame about my behavior. So anybody out there and I experienced the mildest of incest I have read. That's, my incest experience, my sexual abuse experience was nothing. And yet, it dogged me. So I would urge anybody out there, if you've had any kind of a similar experience, and if it's still with you, do something about it. Get some professional help and do it. Anyway.
I was just going to ask, so, wow, thank you so much for being so transparent with us. You started off right out the gate, Grace. I'm curious, what was that? So you said you don't remember the process necessarily, but over that time frame where you've had to come to terms with everything, and it sounds like, at least the way I hear you, that there's some, I hate to use the word responsibility because it's laden with so much meaning, but it sounds like the way in which you came to peace with this, or at least so matter-of-factly shared with us what happened and kind of the process you went through, feels like you also take ownership. Maybe there's some ownership, maybe not responsibility like fault, but like ownership, like this is mine to deal with, this is mine to do something about. I'm curious about how you went about getting to the ownership. Because that's probably something that people struggle through, and your control was a survival mechanism. How did you turn that into something that was more empowering?
I'm not sure. Let's see if I can figure that out. And you're talking about how did I own the experience?
Yeah.
I think part of it was just living with it, knowing that nobody made me feel guilty. I made myself feel shameful about it. Coming to the understanding that part of my spiritual understanding now is everybody does the best they can with what they have in the moment, based on who you are, what your personality is like, that nature thing, based on your experiences, that nurture thing, at any one point in time, and the experiences that you accumulate, and the especially the reinforcing experiences of those wounds, issues, fears, and false beliefs. In any one point in time, you're going to be doing the best you can with what you have. So I think that I came to an understanding that all these years I'd been doing the best I could with what I had. And now I can look at myself differently. It was owning that this was my viewpoint that was not very healthy, and I can adopt a different viewpoint that is healthy, with no blame and no recrimination. I think perhaps I went through some kind of a process like that.
Wow. And you'd mentioned that, that moment where you asserted yourself, like, this isn't happening anymore, right? When you told that family member that you decided that you're going to be forceful and directive in order to manage your safety. So tell us how, now that decision back then when you were, 6 years old, you said?
Mm-hmm.
How has that played out? Having made that decision then, how has that played out in other areas of your life?
Oh, in all areas. Because part of that decision was I have to be strong to be right. Not to be right, but to be good, to be right-minded, to do the right thing, that kind of thing. I think it sort of directed my life now that I think about it. I have I think I've read every self-help book on the planet because I am constantly seeking to be that next best person that I can be. Do the next best right thing to determine what is right. And right has switched. It has evolved as I've been moving along. But I think that's at least one of the ways in which it has exhibited itself. Another way, sort of a positive way it's exhibited itself, both the nature and nurture of my being. I've had tremendous leadership skills that I've exerted. And I can remember I was a co-leader of the social co-leader for my single heirs, which was in my 20s. It was a Sunday school at the Methodist Church downtown Dallas. Oh, it was a huge group of probably over 100 singles, and we had some bang-up parties. And you can't have a bang-up party for over 100 people if you're not organized, and if you don't exert, and if you don't, use your influence to get people to help to do as well. And as a teacher trainer, I was fortunate enough to learn a set of thinking skills, and finally knew what I was in the classroom for. You don't just give information and pitch it back, but you lead children. You're in a position of leadership, and with your questions, you lead them to figure out what relationships there are, what the facts mean, what the whole thing means. Draw conclusions from it all. I took those skills that I learned and dealt with children into working with adults. And I think that being, wanting to do the right thing, being in a leadership position, I think those sorts of things influenced the kind of teacher trainer that I was as well.
That's interesting. So what I'm hearing is that what you did is that part of you that sought to control, to manage, to do that right thing is actually a superpower.
When it's used right.
When it's used right. And it sounds like you're able to take it and apply it to all these different areas of your life that needed order, that needed structure, that needed management, and apply it.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about, when has it been your kryptonite? When has it gone against your when have you seen it?
Well, I'll tell you.
As effective. Give me some examples.
I bring my skills to bear whenever we have family gatherings. And family, as you can imagine, being one of 5 kids, family is really important. My mother's one of 10 kids. We had these huge, marvelous family reunions that was just, so family is a big part of my life. I can remember my second husband when we were about to have a big family gathering. Now, I had 2 small children and a husband, and very high standards. House had to be clean, the table had to be set exactly, the food had to be perfect, etc. And I remember him saying to me one day, Grace, because it would get down to the point where I couldn't do it all. I just couldn't do it all. There was just too much to do. And I can remember him saying, Grace, your lack of planning does not mandate an emergency on my part. He felt pushed. and I can remember recently, I've had some difficulties with some other relatives of mine, just periodically, no big bust ups or anything. But recently, I sent an email because there was some responsibility with another of our relatives that I couldn't fulfill myself. And so I was arranging things so that this person would help me with what I felt was my responsibility, but I couldn't fulfill it. So I sent a text to these people. And I meant to say, I plan to be there at 2:30. But what I sent was, how you shorten your email sometimes? I shortened it. Plan to be there at 2:30. I didn't realize that until I hadn't heard from him, and I called him back. And he's told me, I'm sick and tired of your being pushy and, was it directive? Pushy and directive. Maybe that was the word. Sick and tired of your being. So that means he had experienced that a lot of times beforehand. I've been relatively oblivious a lot of my life. Truly, I have been oblivious and did not realize that what I thought was just the norm, this is what people should do, and try to encourage everybody else to help me with this norm. I was being pushy and directive. It was a revelation. Yeah.
That's interesting. I think as you're sharing what your brand of control looks like, I call it, they're branded, right? Because all of us have a different way of expressing it. I think for me has been in being staunchly independent. Kind of like you. I have 3 brothers. I'm the only girl, and we're all special in our own way, except there's the firstborn. I'm the middle child because I have 2 younger brothers who are twins. So all of us kind of had our special ways. And because I was the only girl, I was privy to a lot of things for myself that no one else had. I had my own room, I had my own toys. I didn't have any hand-me-down clothes for my brothers, stuff like that. And for me, control was, I remember, I'm still a little bit like this, but I remember when I was growing up, I wouldn't let my brothers in my room. They literally had to stand at the door and talk to me if they wanted to engage. And I'm like, get out, step out of the room. What do you want? What do you need? And I would sit there very comfortably doing whatever I was doing, but they literally had to stand there to talk or just ask questions or whatever. And I'm still to this day pretty territorial. Like, I just don't have people over that much. My space has always been pretty special to me. But our brand is always managing. Sorry?
We each have our brand of specialness.
Absolutely. So I can see in ways, and then for me, and I think I shared this on one of the sessions, maybe last week and a couple weeks before, that superpower, being able to manage myself, was fantastic. It was a superpower when I traveled, and I traveled alone a lot of times, and I'm very successful at it. The kind of work that I've been able to do independent of a team or having a supervisor next to me telling me what to do, and been able to be super assertive throughout my life and be successful at it. And there was also a lot of times when it was lonely because there wasn't, I didn't create enough space for people to step in and support or help. And, I had this story that people just weren't supportive enough because I didn't realize my role in stay out, you over there, me over here, this is my space. And how that manifested in me saying, you're not supportive enough.
Funny how we do that, isn't it?
It is.
You're the cause of my problem.
Yeah. So I'm curious now. So obviously, the many years of experience that you've had personally, but you're also a mother. So I'm curious, how does this manifest itself, your control, your either the superpower or your kryptonite self? How does that manifest in your mothering?
I never thought about that, but I did. My mom, bless her heart, she did the best she could with what she had. and she was, what is that airplane guidance that whenever you get off track, they push you back and you get off over here and it pushes you back. Whatever that airplane guidance is thing, it happens that way. Well, my mom was sort of like that. She thought that when I got off track, she needed to tell me what I did wrong. If I got off track, she'd tell me what I did wrong. If I got off, but she never, my perception was that she never praised me. I could never please her. I never felt like I was good enough. When I was in high school, I didn't make the GRE exams that you take to go to college. My score wasn't as high as my friends' was. And I said to myself, the only thing I excel at is being mediocre. I mean, that's a terrible indictment of oneself. But I actually believed it. I never, ever measured up, which is another one of these things. I want to be perfect in everything. I want to do right. I'm still trying to please my mom that's sitting on my shoulder an awful lot. So I forgot what the question was. I'm sorry.
Just about your mothering, how that shows up when
right.
your mother too.
So I kind of, like most people did, I did not want to be like my mother. I did not want to criticize all the time. I wanted to support and buoy up as much as I could. So I remember my little girl had hair that was straight as a string. And I thought, bless her heart. She's never going to have beautiful hair, is she? So I told her every time I combed her hair, I said, oh, your hair is so beautiful. I tended to talk to my children, to explain things and get them involved. And I tended to buoy them up. And I was very directive. I mean, I knew what was right. My daughter, she had a tendency to be histrionic. When something would happen, it was like, oh, and I would let it go on until I thought she had probably played it out as much as she needed to. And I would say, okay, Susanna, you need to control yourself now. Let's go do so and so and so and so. And she'd calm down and we'd go on and do it. She has recently told me that she wants to be careful about allowing her child, who's 14 months now, to have her own feelings. So makes me think that I may have misjudged her and probably should have let her go on a little bit longer, or just let her go on, until she decided she'd had enough. But I was directed. I made a lot of mistakes when I was a little kid. When my children were little, I remember my son, when he was like 3 years old. We were living in London at the time, and he came home and he was playing with some other little kid, and he hit him or was, acting out, was really angry. And I remember telling him, oh, no, honey, you don't want to do that. You don't want to hurt him. You don't, whatever. But I didn't say, Benjamin, you're really angry right now, or we don't hit other people. I didn't do that. I told him he wasn't angry. Again, trying to control, what goes on. Peaceful, so that we do right. So I made my own.
And it sounds like it just kind of came out a little subconsciously, right? Those tendencies.
Yeah. But I want to add too, if there are any parents out there or any people who have grandchildren and you have parents, I've learned you can take part of the credit and part of the blame, but you can't take all the credit. You can't take all the blame about how your kids turn out. I've also discovered for myself that kids, we all come into the world with a template. And that template absorbs good stuff that's going to buoy us up and prop up our the good parts of us. That template is also going to absorb negative stuff that's going to scar us. And what parents don't understand is you don't know what scars them, and you don't know what buoys them up and supports them. You just don't. I had felt guilty about something that my son had. I had not done something to support my child, junior high. I felt guilty about it for 25 years. And finally, about 10 years ago, I sat him down and I said, okay, Benjamin, I felt guilty about this for 25 years. I have to know how much of a scar it made on you. And I explained to him what had happened. And after I finished, he looked at me and he said, Mom, did that really happen? 25 years this has been on my shoulders. You don't even remember it? Oh my God. Then he told me about something that I just did in sort of an offhanded way. Every night I'd say to him something. And he told me later, after that one, he told me that was extremely important to him. What I said to him at night, that it kind of carried him through high school. And he even today remembers it. And I thought, whoa, I never dreamed that would be something seminal to him. I thought he'd like it, but I never dreamed it would be something seminal to his personality. So parents just don't know.
That's funny. I would agree with that we don't know what scars and what buoys people. So
But let me, I'm sorry, I can't stop this without a say. So what do?
Yeah.
You do the best you can with what you have. Love them in the best way that you can. And the biggest obligation, the biggest responsibility you have to your child is, if you know that you have an issue about X, Y, and Z, you get that issue settled. You need to heal. If you know you have a wound, you need to heal. If you know that you have a false belief that comes up in your life, you need to restate it and learn what it is, because you teach who you are to your children. And the best thing you can do for them is to get as straight as you can with yourself in order to be a good parent. Now,
it's funny you say this. And one of these days I may have to invite my dad to be on this call. We had some really fantastic conversations. I was sharing with him an experience I had with my nephew acting out about something. And my dad said to me, well, it sounds like he just needs someone to listen. You need to figure out what the feeling is, like what's at the root of that feeling. And I was like, okay, Dad, can you hang on a second? I just need to look at my caller ID. Is this my dad talking? Like, who is this? Because our experience growing up, at least my experience growing up, did not necessarily reflect that was the process. And so I shared it with him, and I'm like, wait, where did this come from? Have you been watching Dr. Phil or something? Like, what is this? Who is this man? And he said something very similar. He said, I just didn't know what I didn't know when y'all were growing up. And now that I know more things, I see things from a different perspective, that I can take different actions. And I think that points so brilliantly to what you just said. We have the responsibility that when we suss out, we discover that there's a wound, there's some hurt part of us, our responsibility is to actually heal it, to figure out a way to diminish the pain, to ameliorate it, to do whatever we can, not to hold a story about it, right?
Yes.
To be victimized by it. And then, sometimes victimize other people as a result.
Amen.
And I love that. And I think that's, my dad demonstrates, and both my mom and my dad have had their moments of clarity now that we're older. And it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we did that. This is what I think would be best to do now, especially with grandchildren. They're able to apply some of this.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of grace to do so. And I think what you also point to is some compassion, some self-compassion. So how do you manage that? How do you practice? First of all, two questions. One is, how do you manage to identify when something hurts, when there's something to be healed? But sometimes I think we might need some clues for that. And then when you discover that, how do you give yourself that compassion to be able to look at it without it throwing you off or taking you out?
This is going to be where a spiritual component comes into this, because my spiritual life is, an integral part of who I am. First thing you have to do is pay attention. The biggest thing you have to do is pay attention. We spend our lives habitually behaving. We don't stop and think about what we're doing. We just behave. And the first thing you have to do is to be mindful of what's going on within you. Course in Miracles says that if you're not in peace, then you're functioning on a fear or a false belief. So if I'm unhappy, if I'm irritated, if I feel a bit shamed, if I'm angry, all those negative feelings are indicators that you need to look at something. Because if you totally loved yourself, you would feel totally loving to everyone else in the world. You would recognize that they make mistakes. You would recognize that they're behaving, when they behave badly, they're behaving out of their own wounds. But you wouldn't hate them. You wouldn't want to strike them down for it. So when you feel the slightest bit negative, when you're out of peace or you're out of love, that's the biggest indication that you need to start digging.
Can you give an example of how, like, just in life, give an example of what that would look like something that you've experienced, for example, where you've noticed, oh, I'm in pain or I'm in.
I can, let's see, which one do I want to pick? Well, the only thing that's coming up to me right this second is, and we haven't gone into yet this whole thing about how I've learned to improve, on this once I've discovered this, become aware of my control, what did I do about it? We haven't got to that part yet, but part of that story is my wonderful husband, who is my third best and final husband. He and I have characterized our personalities as I'm the rabbit and he's the turtle. I speak fast, I eat fast, I walk fast, I think fast, I drive fast. He doesn't. And it shows up a lot, or it used to show up a lot when he'd be driving, I'd go places with him. He does not drive like I do. And it's constant in my head, why did he do that? Why isn't he going faster? Why didn't he turn over there? Why isn't he in the other lane? Oh my gosh, are we really going to go this far? So, all of those little questions, you notice those. Well, I noticed those. And I had been doing a lot of processing, and I finally came to an understanding one day when it was like I'd been thinking about this and trying to let it go and wondering what it was. And one day we were in the car together, and he couldn't go the long way. He couldn't go the long way that he wanted to because the road was blocked off. And so he had to go a different way. So instead of just kind of taking the shortest route like I would have done back to the other street and gone another direction, he went all the way around the blueberry bush, all the way up here, and then went back around. And I realized in that minute, this is what he's comfortable with. He's not comfortable with. With going this little short way that I would have gone. And I realized that, it's true. My Virgo, I know the fastest way, the shortest way, the most efficient way of getting from A to B. I do. You just name it. I'm going to find, if I don't know it absolutely, I'm going to find it. The shortest, fastest, most efficient way to get there. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, that's not always the best way to go, is it? Oh, there's other criteria in the world that may not be the best way to go. And it was, believe it or not, it was a revelation to me.
I believe it.
My way may not be the best way. Oh. So that was sort of an instantaneous revelation. In other ways, I can't give you an example to think about right now, but in other ways, if something is disturbing me and I know that I need to process it, then I'll go in meditation and I'll ask Spirit to show me the place in my childhood or show me the incident where this ire is based on. Course in Miracles says you're never upset for the reason you think. That snarky thing that your friend said, you're not really upset over that snarky thing that friend said. If you look under it, it might be something like your mother used to say snarky things to you like that, and it undermined your confidence in yourself. And that's what you were hearing. You didn't hear what your friend said. You were hearing the echoes of your mother. So the first thing you do is understand that what I'm upset about is not what I'm upset about. It has nothing to do with this that's going on right this minute. It has nothing to do with that. And so one of the processes that I have is I take it into meditation and I ask Spirit to show me, where did this come from? And often, I go back to my mom, usually. It's a relationship issue or a problem that happened with my mom. And it gives me an opportunity to see what happened. Forgive my mom, forgive myself, because my mom was doing the best she could with what she had. She didn't intentionally scar me. She loved me desperately. I, as this innocent, didn't know anything but to interpret what happened as I'm a bad person or I fell short or whatever it was. That's all I could do in my innocence. So I had an opportunity to forgive my mother. I had an opportunity to forgive myself. In the end, you come to this loving state of equilibrium. I love my mother. I loved myself. And realize there's nothing to forgive. And then I can come back to this situation and realize I interpreted what happened as being this thing over here. This is nullified. This is neutral. This doesn't have anything to do with what disturbed me. And I then am able to respond to what did happen in a rational, loving way.
Yeah, I think the key there is just being that, like you said, mindful, right? Being conscious of what is coming up for us. And I also love that you talked about, those are moments where you're not at peace. And those are the telltale signs that there's something to heal, there's something to look at, there's something to find out what's the source, right? What's at the root, is when we are not at peace.
Absolutely.
And oftentimes I imagine that when we're dealing with issues of control, there's a lot of lack of peace happening in the moment. But I imagine that some of us, if not most of us, have this opportunity to want to exert some control or some pressure, or to like manage whatever is creating that lack of peace, whether that's a person, whether that's your husband's driving, whether that's someone coming into my space, whether that's whatever that brand of peace that's been broken, we want to exert outward. What you're pointing to is actually this is the perfect time to go inward and to find out, wow, okay, there's a lack of peace here. It has nothing to do with what's happening in the exterior. It's all to do with this story that I've come up with, or that I've used to interpret in my interior. Now, in moments of silence, in your case, meditation, figuring out where's that coming from and how do I heal it. I love that. That is brilliant. You've mentioned A Course in Miracles a couple of times, and I want to make sure that those that are listening, and thank you all so much for being engaged in this conversation. I want to make sure that they understand what that means, what it is, since you've referred to it a couple of times. And before you do that, I do want to mention those of you who are online with us live, whether here on Zoom or even on Facebook, please go ahead and type in your question or comment. What insights are you getting from this conversation? If you'd like to speak up and you actually say something and engage with us, if you're on the phone here on Zoom, hit *9, and that will raise your hand and I'll know to call on you. Or those of you who are on the webcam, you can hit the hand icon to raise your hand, and I'll call on you then as well. So you want to make sure that you ask a question or make whatever comment you'd like to do before we end our conversation today. So back to Grace. Grace, Course in Miracles, tell us what it is and why that's an important tool for you.
A Course in Miracles is a book, and it is my spiritual path now. I picked up the book. I acquired the book from a friend in the mid-'70s. And I, like a good student, page 1, chapter 1, began reading it. And it just went over my head right away. So I put it on the shelf for 35 years. John started a group about 10 years ago in our church, the Unity Church on Greenville. And I began, again, I picked the book up and began to study it. And I had huge questions from my Baptist foundation. 14 years old, I began to question the veracity of everything that of a good bit of what I was taught. I ended up in the Unity Church, which was, it was in sync more with what resonated with me as the truth. And then, but I still had lots of questions. But the Course in Miracles seems to answer all of my questions. It's just a whole complete path for me. Essentially, in a nutshell, it says we are asleep in God, dreaming that we're here. But we're not here. We really are in God, which means that there is only oneness. There is God, and I am a part of God. It's like a hologram. You know, a hologram has everything that is the whole, and then there is the whole. So it's like we all are one. There's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. There are not 6 people here. There's one entity. That entity is love, joy, peace. All that we think of as being the divine. But from the moment of birth, we are taught that this world, with the sights, the sounds, the feelings, the touches, the tastes, that's reality. We're not taught that we are one with God, that we have spirit. I think that you're sitting there and I'm sitting here. We're taught separation. And because we're taught separation, and because we think we have separated from God, way deep down inside of us, we kind of feel guilty that we could even have done such a thing as separate from God. And so much of our behavior, because guilt is not fun, we try to blame other people. We blame you, you know. I blame anybody and everybody. Everything that is outside of me is the cause of my problem. It's not me. So there are tools that Course in Miracles says that we need in order to get through this, in order to recognize our oneness. The first one is prayer. Prayer is not asking for things. Well, you can ask for things in a prayer, but that's the very lowest level, most ineffective level of prayer. Highest level of prayer is aligning with this oneness, aligning with love, peace, and joy, feeling your oneness with God. The second tool is forgiveness. And forgiveness, like I described a minute ago, is not, you did that snarky thing to me. But you know what? I forgive you. That is not forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't recognize that you did a wrong and somehow erase it. That's not what it is. Forgiveness is recognizing you're doing the best you can with what you have. What you did came from your wounds, issues, and fears, if it was a negative thing. My reaction to you came from my wounds, issues, and fears if I did something snarky back to you. So what I need to realize is that you did the best you could with what you had. Course in Miracles, this is another one of the tools, says we have actually 2 behaviors. 1, we're expressing love. 2, we're calling for love, help, and healing. So your snarky behavior, that was just saying, please love me. I just want to be loved. It looked like snarky behavior, but it was an appeal. Please love me and accept me just as I am. Help me to be free. My reaction to you, if it was snarky, it was the same thing. I still was acting out of my wounds. I still was appealing for love from you. That's the first level, the ego level of how to forgive. And the deeper level is you are perfect, whole, and complete. You are love, joy, and peace. There's no way that the real you can do anything that's going to try to hurt me. I am love, joy, and peace. That's really all I am. I am not this flesh and blood body. I am love, joy, and peace. There's not anything that I can do to you I wouldn't do anything that would hurt you. One of the, in the very beginning of the Course in Miracles, it says, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. So
nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists? Is that unreal?
That's right. You can't hurt me. I am truly indestructible because I am real. I am aligned with God. I am spirit. I am peace, love, and joy. This thing that destructs eventually, it really doesn't exist. The only thing real about me is what you can't see. That's within. So,
thank you. That's really good. The only thing real about me is what you can't see. Yeah. I think that's a bumper sticker in the making. I want to bring in one of our listeners who has a comment for you. Johanna, go ahead. Tell us where you're calling from, Johanna, so Grace knows who you are.
I'm actually not in Dallas today. I'm in a very, very small little town called Edna, Texas. And so I'm working from home, but it's like an hour south of Houston. But anyway, I definitely, when I saw the topic today, I was like, oh boy, I should probably jump on this one because control has always been something that I struggle with really since forever. I mean, since I can remember, but after years and years of therapy and much like Grace's story, I unfortunately had a childhood filled with severe abuse. And so even the leadership class that I went through last year, and talking to somebody that I'd never even met before, and we were talking about some things that I should work on, and listening was actually one of the things that I really want to focus on. And within 5 minutes, she's like, can I ask you a personal question? And I was like, okay. And she said, did something happen to you when you were a kid? And I was like, what? I mean, I was so perplexed by that. But I think that the control thing and the need to get something accomplished and to go straight for what you want and to right away set your feet in, place them in, demand what you want, I think is all a defense mechanism in a way, or at least I guess it has been for me. So for me, I think it was so eye-opening that I thought, oh my gosh, how much am I doing this? And while I know that the control thing was probably one of the bigger issues in my marriage, I thought, oh my gosh, I must really project this in a way that I don't even realize. And it made me sad. It really did. I don't ever want to people to feel that I'm that way, or not open to other ideas or anything like that. And being a type A personality, that's one thing, but it just made me so self-aware and a little bit insecure almost. Like I began to just be quiet. And maybe I needed to. Maybe I needed to listen a little more. But it was eye-opening just for some stranger that I'd literally never met to just know that, for me, I think it was survival. I think for me to take control over going forward, I felt like I needed to do that. And so, this whole conversation has been very eye-opening, and I too am that passenger driver that I'm like, why are they doing this? And why are we, there's an open lane to the left. Why are we in a line? I am definitely that person. I'm like, I don't understand why don't they see what I see, this kind of thing. And, but it is an internal struggle literally all the time. And I don't want to be that person to my son. And unfortunately, I know that I have. I mean, I don't mean to. It's definitely something that, you do the best you can, like you said. And I literally am like, I should just start paying for his therapy.
Start a savings account.
Yeah. Let me just start making payments now.
Thank you for sharing that, Johanna. Grace, what would you say to that, what Johanna just shared?
Thank you for sharing that. And don't feel guilty about anything. Don't feel upset for the past. Recognize that you recognize and celebrate that. You recognize that perhaps or yes, you've been controlling. That's the first step, paying attention, recognizing that that's the first step toward doing something different, and move forward with it. Ask for guidance and move forward with what you need to do to make the next change. And it's not to completely, eliminate control in your life and be a new person next week. But what's the next step on your journey? That's what I would say. If it's okay, I would like to talk about what brought me up to really looking at my control issues, which was, go ahead.
Before you do that, yes, I do. Thank you very much, Johanna, for sharing what you shared. And I appreciate you revealing parts of you. Every time that you come on this program, you have something more revealing to share. I really want to acknowledge that. We've hit the hour mark, and this is a big subject. So I'm actually going to let go of the control of closing down the topic before we get to this good part. So I want to be respectful, though, of those of you who need to jump off. Please do. You know that this recording will be available. I do want to share that next week we have another special guest. We're going to be focusing on health and wellness with Heather Lynn Darby. You may have heard she's participated in a few of our sessions as well. So we're looking forward to Heather talking about her own journey to gaining health and how she's helping other people do the same. So that's going to be coming up next week, same time, same place. So for those of you who have to jump off, please feel free to do so now. And everyone else who's just captivated by this discussion and finding ways to apply this into their life, I want to get back to what you were saying, Grace. Yes, please do share. What is it that you have in your heart to mention?
Okay, and I will edit this somewhat. It became aware to me that I wanted to have some counseling certificate, some kind of credentials, because while I'd read every self-help book on the planet and been in therapy 4 times myself and have a feel for what therapy is, I didn't feel qualified to actually do therapy, and I was involved in doing counseling with people through our Course in Miracles group. So I looked around, and there's an organization called Pathways of Light. They are a church without walls. They put out much training. It's very wonderful. And every bit of it is founded in Course in Miracles principles. They happen to have a ministerial program. So I enrolled in their ministerial program. And it had 4 steps. The first 3 steps was clearing yourself of your psychological, emotional, and spiritual false beliefs and debris. And a lot of stuff came up. It took me a year, and there was just a lot periodically that would come up that I knew were control issues. So I'd peel away a little layer of it. Another control issue would come up, peel another layer off. Another control issue would come, peel another layer off. This happened all year long. I was ordained in November on the 19th, and it was, the last month was really hectic, and there were celebrations on the Sunday when I was ordained. The day after, I went to spend 10 days with my daughter in New York with a brand new 9-month-old baby, and then we got home, and I crashed. And I thought, why? I mean, I'm finished with this, with my certificate, I've gotten a rev. I spent time with why am I depressed? And I realized it just came to me. Spirit spoke to me and said, your real control issue is that you don't want to give up Grace, Evelyn, Sanders, Rice, Collier, Bradley, Vyvyan. Those are all my married names. I was habitually operating as Grace Vyvyan all my life. Well, Grace, all my life. I've been operating as Grace, this person with the suit, the person suit, all my life. Thinking about my brand new baby, Evie Marie, we come out of the womb with, oh, Evie Marie, your name is Evie Marie. We've been waiting for you for 9 months. I'm so pleased that you're here. I'm your mommy. Here's your daddy. That's the doctor. There's the nurse. That's the ceiling. There's the bed. This is the sheets. Separation. From the moment we come out of the womb, we are taught, you are you and I am I. We are not taught spiritual principles that we are one. We're not taught that that your body is the unreal thing and what's real about you I can't see. We're not taught that. So we grow up habitually thinking as an ego. Habitually. We don't think to question our ego-ness. And I realized that my biggest control issue was getting away from my ego-ness. It was being willing to stop thinking. My biggest issue was being willing to stop thinking with the ego and begin to habitually think with spirit. So, Course in Miracles is divided up in 3 different sections. The first is the text, the second is the workbook, and the fourth is something called a manual for teachers. The workbook has 1 lesson per day. The instructions are do 1 lesson a day, do them as prescribed. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to like them. You can actively resist them, but just do them, and it's going to make a difference to your life.
Kind of like exercising certain vegetables.
Absolutely. I had done some of the lessons, but I'd never, ever done them seriously with trying to practice them. So I began January the 1st practicing the lessons. Sometimes you have to think something once an hour. Sometimes you have 15 minutes in the morning when you think about this thing, or 15 minutes in the evening. And the whole practice of it is to try to get you to think more and more with and as spirit. Think more love, think more joy, think more forgiveness, think more hope, think more happiness. And I am in the middle of all of this, and I'm happy to report that I'm not there yet. I can see signs of hope. One of the control things that has plagued me through my life is I'm a smart person. I've read all these psychology books. I know what you need to be doing. If you just do X, Y, and Z, your life would improve so much. And I toned it down so that I'd say, well, if I were you, blah, 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 blah. But I was still telling people what to do. And through this, an example of how I have toned that down, a friend of mine the other day was talking about her husband and how he needs to do X, Y, and Z. He's just going to kill himself if he doesn't. I just can't understand why he doesn't do X, Y, and Z. Oh, and when I had blah, 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 what I did was MNO. He needs to do MNO. I know that's his problem too. And inside my head, I was, honey, why are you doing that to him? How do you know that's what he needs to be doing? I mean, you don't know. He has his own way of doing it. Maybe you're criticizing him and telling him he needs to do ABC is worse than his not doing ABC. And then I stopped. And I thought, oh my God, I'm doing to her what she's doing to him. Oh yeah. This is that I know what you should be doing thing that I've been doing all my life. And I thought, how do I know what she should be doing? I don't. Do I know anything about the relationship that they have with one another? Maybe he doesn't get off, point 0 until she pushes him. Maybe that's what they have in there. I don't know. Maybe she's completely right or not. Maybe she's completely wrong. It's none of my business. Well, what is my business? My business is to know that each of them have a strong inner guide. And that inner guide, they listen to. I know those people. They are on the path. They are searchers and seekers. My job is to support them in their search and know for them that they are perfect, whole, and complete people, and they're doing what they need to be doing in their lives. So I completely, in my head, backed off because I wouldn't say all that stuff to my friend. And I backed off. I was able just to support her. So that's at least one evidence that I really am, managing to make a few differences in my
You're
life.
evolving. I love that, and it's that realization that it was like that moment of inception, right? She's controlling him, you're controlling her, and we don't. And it's so sneaky how that happens. I did have a similar experience. I did a 10-day meditation retreat last year. It was the second time I went, but this time I was a staff member. And my role was to manage certain aspects of this particular experience for people. Well, around the 7th or 8th day or so, the teacher asked me to tell someone that they needed to dress more appropriately for the setting. Yeah, it's a very conservative dress that we needed to have. And so I pulled this woman out during the lunch break. It was a silent meditation, so there was not much talking with anybody at all. But when we had to, we had definitely pulled them aside. I pulled her aside and I said, you're going to have to cover your shoulders. The the halter top you're wearing, is that appropriate? And she was like, are you kidding me? This is the second time I wore this top. No one ever said anything to me. And da, 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 da. And, and I remember in the moment, this is after 7 or 8 days of meditating myself too. I remember just listening to her and watching myself think through what she was sharing. And like, do I have anything to say? No, I don't have anything to say. She's going through what she's going through. She's expressing some displeasure or discomfort and me pointing it out. And so she went on for, maybe 10, 15 seconds. And I just looked at her and I said, well, do you need anything? And she's like, no, I can't believe this. Da, 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 da. And I said, okay. All right, well, if there's anything I can do, let me know, when she finished. And I remember that moment, like, it very clear that the moment of no control for me was suspend all judgment that whatever is happening in front of me is wrong or bad or should be done differently. That didn't, in that moment, didn't exist. Which I thought was really strange because it was so not like me. So I had to pay special attention to that conversation. Then also noticing that I just had to be in service, and being in service, like you described, is really allowing that person to pull in and bring in whatever type of need or guidance or support they actually need. After that I don't know, 30 seconds, maybe a minute interaction, I just stood there. She kind of got her wits about herself, and she said, you know what, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be reacting this way. I know we're not here for that. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. And then she left. And I was like, oh, that was so easy. And luckily that carried through a few days. I had a conversation with my mother shortly after I left that meditation retreat. And something similar happened where I'm like, oh my gosh, the need to judge and exert certain influence over my mother's way of thinking or behavior seemed to have suspended itself. I'm like, I don't feel like I need to say anything. Okay. And we've been in that dance ever since. So what you described is very, is next level stuff, Grace. It's definitely next level stuff.
And actually what I have discovered through this is that there are, if you're going to change a habit, I mean, this is what I call habits. Control is habit. All the kinds of negative stuff that we do, judging other people, these are habit kinds of things. And what I'm trying to do is change my habit of behaving in control all the time. And there are levels that you go through. The first level is an event happens, you behave. An event happens, you behave. An event happens, you go on like this, and then one day you realize, that behavior may not be serving me very well. And so you study and you decide that I'm going to do this differently. So the event happens, oh, darn it. After a while, I didn't do anything different. The event happens, darn it, I didn't do anything different. You go through that for a while. And then the event happens and, I'm going to do this differently. And then the event happens and you catch yourself in midstream. I'm going to do this differently. That's what was happening to you, and that's what's happening to me. And then you go through, the event happens, you do it differently. And you look back and say, I did it differently, look at that. The event happens, you do it differently, and you look back and say, I did it differently. Oh, praise me, praise me. And it's important to praise every little bit when you have success. And then you get to the point where the event happens, you do it, you don't even think about it anymore, because it truly is a habit. It's an integral part of your behavior. So I can see that, I'm not way up here on 5, but I'm at least approaching 3.
And thank goodness for that. I think that creates, there's always more to learn and more to grow, for sure. And I love that you shared your own journey. I have one of the comments here from Heather is that, this is her own ongoing lesson as well, is, telling or suggesting to people what they should do. And that does the opposite typically, right? When you do that. So what you've been sharing with us this time has really resonated with people. Thank you so much, Grace. Any final message before we sign off for today?
Anytime you're trying to change a behavior, it's important to praise yourself, to celebrate even the tiniest of successes, because that's important. You won't progress unless you recognize and celebrate your successes.
Absolutely. It's part of building those neural pathways so that it becomes a habit, like you mentioned. This has been super enlightening. Thank you so very much for what you've shared, who you've been throughout this time together, and how everything just kind of came through like you wanted to, and the impact that you've had on all the people who are listening now and also will be listening in the future. Because this will be here forever. Maybe even Marie might watch this and go, "That's my grandma!" At some point, if this exists still when she's grown up enough.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for this service that you are offering to mankind.
It's a treat. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Grace.
Hey, thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sandy. And thank you, Heather. Thanks, John. Thanks, all of you, for participating today. We'll see you next week where we have Heather, like I mentioned before, talking about her journey through wellness and how she's helping other people along the same path. And thank you guys again. I'll post this in the next couple of days. Feel free to share this with your community so that you can also find ways to bring about conversations about how you show up in controlling ways and what you can do to be a better version of yourself every step of the way. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.